So, before we get started, I just want to acknowledge, I guess, that this is a really emotive issue. People get really impassioned and really emotional about this, and it is a very sensitive thing. So I want to talk about this as graciously and lovingly as I can. I want to talk about it in a way that I think Jesus would, and I might not do that perfectly, but here we go anyway. So we're talking about abortion. As you probably guessed from the title of this video and the thumbnail of this video, yeah, we're talking about abortion. And if you want to know my thoughts and opinions on abortion, then you're in the right place. If you are in a position where you agree with abortion and you think it's a fine thing, it is a good thing, then I want to say thank you for being here. I think it's really awesome that you're here, and I might say some stuff that you disagree with. I might say some stuff that you can't really get behind, but I also hope that I do say some stuff that you do agree with and that you can get behind. And I hope I don't say anything that makes you think, oh, I would never want to talk to him, I would never want to meet this guy, because like I'm wanting to tell what I think is the truth here, but I'm wanting to tell it with love and grace and compassion. If you are in a place though where you oppose abortion, if you maybe take a more traditional Christian understanding of it, a Christian view of it, then yeah, you're probably gonna agree with a lot of the stuff I say. You might disagree with some of it, you might be challenged by it, but this is something that I've been thinking about for a very long time and talking to people about and reading about and praying about. So take it for what it is. This is my opinion on abortion. These are three things that I think the church really needs to consider and really needs to think about as we try and address abortion and work out how we're going to respond to it. So before we get started, if you're new here, my name is Andrew and this is All Things Theology. This channel exists to help you learn about and live out your faith in Jesus, and I do that by making videos about all sorts of different things, whether it be cultural issues or questions in the Bible or philosophical things, all these different topics. I make videos about those. So if that's something that you are into, then do consider subscribing. That would be great. I would really appreciate that. Okay, so abortion, let's get into that. The first thing that I want to say is that if you are against abortion and if your only response to abortion is to quote Psalm 139 and to say abortion is murder, abortion is wrong, you shouldn't do it. If that is your only response to abortion, if that's all you have to speak into the topic, then you're not saying enough. You're not actually addressing the real reason, I think, why women are having abortion. And what you're possibly doing is actually just heaping shame on women who are maybe already experiencing that, who already feel rejected and ostracized and outcast. You're just putting more shame on them, and that's not actually going to stop them from having the abortion. It's just going to make them feel even worse. A different approach to that I think we see in the Bible, as I said, I want to keep this as scriptural as possible. A different approach we see is Jesus in John chapter 4. In John chapter 4, you may or may not know the story, but short version is Jesus is going through an area called Samaria. Samaria was where the Samaritans lived, and Jews and Samaritans didn't really get on. And he approached a well. He arrived at this well at midday, and there was a woman there. And for the original audience who would have been listening to John's Gospel or reading John's Gospel, this would have jumped out as something that was really strange, because nobody went to get their water at midday. If you think all the water that you use in a day for drinking and doing your dishes and washing yourself, they didn't really have running water in first century Israel or Samaria. So they had to go to the well. They had to just draw that stuff out and cart it back to the house. And so that was tough work. And in a warm climate, it was sweaty and it was very difficult work. And so they did that early in the morning. They went in the morning before the sun came up, before it got really hot. And so this woman being here at midday when everyone else was maybe having a siesta or just chilling out inside, that screams that she didn't want to be seen by other people, or maybe she didn't want to see other people. There's something about her that is maybe a little off, that she wouldn't want that social interaction. But Jesus comes up to her and he immediately starts talking to her. And she's like, this is really weird because you're a Jewish guy, I'm a Samaritan woman. We don't really mix, but Jesus, he keeps talking to her anyway because he's Jesus and he does stuff like that. He's great. And over the course of their conversation, we discover that she has had 5 husbands, and at the minute she's living with a 6th guy who she's not even married to. And even by our standards today, that's pretty crazy. So by first century Israel standards, with Jewish standards, that is totally wild, and it really explains why she didn't want to be seen by other people, why she didn't want that social interaction with her town, because everyone was going to know, and everyone probably thought some really negative things about her. And to be honest, Jesus could have given her both barrels. He could have come in really strong, saying, listen, you awful woman, you've had 5 husbands, you're living with a 6th man, that is really wrong. And at this point in the scriptures, we don't get it in John's Gospel, but at this point, Jesus has already given the Sermon on the Mount. So he's laid out his moral ethic for life and living as a kingdom citizen. That includes a sexual ethic, which this woman is very clearly breaking, and Jesus could have went in both barrels and said, you are living in a wrong way and you need to change and turn around and repent of all that. But what I think is amazing is that he doesn't do that. Not initially, anyway. What he does is he has this conversation with her, and he recognizes the root cause, the core underlying issue of why she's actually doing this stuff. He sees that she's unfulfilled, that she's maybe looking for contentment or satisfaction, fulfillment in a romantic relationship, and then that doesn't work out, so then she tries another one, and then she tries another one, and by the time she's got to the 6th guy, she's maybe given up on the concept of marriage. She's like, I'll just stick with him until I'm unsatisfied, and then I'll move on to the next one, because she cannot find her satisfaction, she cannot find fulfillment in these relationships, and that is the reason that she's going from one man to the next, to the next, to the next. And so Jesus steps in and he tells her that in him she will find fulfillment. He says that he's the living water, that he's the Messiah, and she comes to believe him. And in believing him, she immediately runs back into town, which is really strange, because this woman who was out getting water in the middle of the day because she didn't want to see anyone, she runs back into her town to tell everyone, I've found the Messiah, and through her, many people in the town come to believe. Now, I think it's reasonable to conclude, we don't see an account of this, we don't really hear from her again, but I think it's reasonable to conclude that this woman stopped with the sexual immorality. And I think it's really key that Jesus didn't go straight in both barrels and say, you are living in sin. Instead, what he did was he looked past the sin, he looked past the wrong behaviour that she was doing, and he saw underneath that she was an image bearer of God, that she was looking for something and she was trying to find fulfillment in all these other places, and so he addressed the root cause of her sin, and by doing that, he was able to bring her to salvation in a way that he maybe wouldn't have done if he had just told her, you're wrong. Because if he had done that, he would have just been like everyone else in the town, and she maybe would have felt ostracized from him and thought, okay, here's just another guy coming along and telling me that I'm living the wrong way. I don't really care what he thinks. I think that is such an important story whenever it comes to abortion, because often the stereotype or the narrative around why women get abortions is that, oh, they hate babies and they want to murder people. But actually, that's not the case. There are core underlying reasons why women are having abortions, and we need to address those rather than just telling them, you're doing a wrong thing here. There have been a lot of studies done on why women have abortions, and one of the most famous ones is from the Guttmacher Institute, if that's how you say it. I don't really know. Guttmacher Institute in 2004, they did this huge research into why women are having abortions, and basically what they did, they gave 1,200 women a questionnaire asking them, why are you having an abortion? List the various reasons, tick the boxes, and then they interviewed 38 women, asking them to just talk a little bit more about those reasons. So this is called qualitative and quantitative research. Those two words are very difficult to say. Qualitative research is saying, okay, what are the numbers? What are the stats? How many people think this? How many people think this? How many are saying this? Whereas qualitative research is actually, okay, taking those people who have responded and asking them questions, speaking to them as individuals and kind of humanizing the stats. So 1,200 people surveyed, 38 people interviewed, and the stuff that they said was really, really interesting, really quite insightful. So 74% of the women said that having a baby would dramatically change their life. And you're like, well, yeah, obviously that's the case. It's going to change anyone's life. But whenever you dig a little bit deeper and look at the rest of the reasons, it's even more insightful. So 73% of them said that they can't afford a baby right now. 48% said they don't want to be a single mother, or they're maybe having relationship problems. 38% said that it would interfere with their education. 38% said that it would interfere with their job or their employment or their career. 28% said they can't afford a baby and childcare, and 23% said they can't afford the basic needs of life. The study says that respondents who cited financial reasons frequently reported feeling stressed and strained to the limit of their current resources. So, okay, let's humanize this a little bit. Imagine you are living payslip to payslip, month to month. You may be saving like £100 a month at the end of every month. You're working 60-hour weeks. You're not in a committed relationship, and then you find out that you're pregnant. That is super stressful. And if you don't have a husband, if you're not in a stable relationship, that is so stressful for you to be going through suddenly on your own. Now, you maybe get 12 weeks maternity from your job. Okay, it's not a whole lot. You have another 4 years before that child is able to go to school. And so for those 4 years, whenever you're working your 60-hour weeks, who's going to look after that kid? I don't know. And what if you can't afford childcare because you can only save £100 a month when it's just you? Well, then again, there's another issue. Who's going to look after this child? You can't afford childcare. There may be a husband, there may be a partner, there might not be. There may be parents who can help out, but again, there might not be. Also, it costs around $10,000 in the US for a non-complicated birth. So that is just, if you don't have health insurance, that is just going to take you forever to pay off. So the reasons that women are having abortions are very complex and really varied. I'm not going to go through every single bit of data, but the gist is that no one is having an abortion because they just really hate babies and love to murder them. If the issue was their morality, then maybe teaching them that abortion is wrong, maybe that would be helpful. But actually, if it's for some other reason and they're maybe already reluctant to have the abortion, then heaping shame on them isn't going to help them. It's not going to stop them necessarily from having the abortion. It'll probably make them feel worse than they already do. And it'll also likely alienate them from the church, make them think, I don't want anything to do with Christians, when actually the church should be their place where they find hope and where they find refuge, and the church should be the place that's supporting them. So that's the first thing that we need to consider, that before we jump in with both barrels, that we actually think about, okay, why are these people having abortions? Once we understand that, then we can think about this issue a lot more clearly and address it a lot more easily. The second point of the three that I want to make then is that we need a really strong scriptural understanding of what the Bible says about abortion, what the Bible says about the unborn, as well as what the Bible says about mothers. I'm going to take it as a given that if you are a Christian, then you believe life begins at conception. I'm not going to go into that in this video, or talk about the reasons why we as Christians believe that. If you want another video on that, I can do that. I suppose a helpful place to start would be Psalm 139, and then I suppose the whole conception and birth narrative of Jesus. Those are helpful places to start. But if you're a Christian, I'm just going to take it as a given that that's what you believe. If that's not what you believe, and even you're not a Christian, like, thank you for being here still. I hope that just because we disagree that I don't hate you, I hope that you wouldn't hate me. It's cool that you're here, so thank you for still being here. Right, so if you believe that life begins at conception, then abortion at any stage is taking a human life. It is murder. We can't avoid that or ignore that, and while we maybe shouldn't always lead with that harsh truth, it is the truth. But actually, the Bible has so much more to say on the topic than just that. So let's think for a minute about how pregnancy works, and not in that way. That's all things biology, not all things theology. Let's think about just pregnancy as a concept. Okay, God could have made pregnancy work in any way that he wanted. Okay, this is a weird thought experiment, but God could have made it that humans lay eggs and they sit on them for 9 months, and then a baby comes out. And so by this stage in the 21st century, we would have, okay, someone lays an egg, and then you put it in an incubator, and you kind of go about your life, and then you get a phone call, you're like, oh, here, your baby's hatching. You're like, oh, great. And you go and you get your baby. I guess that's really quite a weird thought to think, but God could have done it that way. Okay, he could have. He also could have made it that storks delivered babies. If you still think that storks deliver babies, you're probably a little too young to be here. So go talk to your parents about that. But instead, what God did is that he made the relationship between mother and baby so tight and so integrally linked that what happens to one happens to the other. That's why women who smoke during their pregnancy have babies who are addicted to nicotine, because they're so closely linked. And so any approach we take to abortion, any thoughts we have about abortion, it absolutely must consider the women and the baby. Okay, it must think about how do we love both? How do we see the prosperity of both? How do we see both thrive? We can't just concern ourselves with making sure the baby is born and then, okay, someone else's problem. We need to make sure that the mother is physically healthy. We need to make sure that the baby is physically healthy. We need to make sure that the mother is mentally healthy, is in a place where she can support a baby, and if she needs financial help, then we need to be able to offer that. We need to be able to provide the sort of environment where a baby can be born into, because that is going to stop abortion. If you think back to the reasons that women gave for abortion, a lot of them were really practical. It was about material, practical things that they're going to need. Things like there being no one to look after the baby when the mother or the parents are working. Maybe they couldn't afford clothes or a pram or a crib or nappies. Babies go through a serious amount of nappies and they're so expensive. We'll talk about that a wee bit more in the next point though. Stick a pin in that. We'll come back to that. The women who are in these situations where they're facing financial pressure, financial constraints, and then they become pregnant, they are in a difficult position. And the Bible actually has so much to say about how we should care for the vulnerable and how we should care for those who are in need. In the Old Testament, the test for how well Israel were doing as a nation, how well they were doing spiritually, it wasn't like, okay, how many sacrifices are they bringing, or how well are they observing all the feasts and festivals and holidays. It wasn't how well they were doing all of the religious stuff. It was how well they were looking after the widow and the poor and the orphan and the vulnerable. That was the litmus test for how they were doing spiritually. If you want like a list of verses that prove this, it's actually just totally overwhelming. It's like asking, hey Andrew, can you tell us a verse that shows God loves us? Like the whole thing, it's just, I would literally be listing verses for hours. Here's just a couple really famous ones. Amos 5, 21-24. God says, I despise your religious festivals. Your assemblies are a stench to me. Even though you bring me burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. Though you bring choice fellowship offerings, I will have no regard for them. Away with the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the music of your harps. But let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never-failing stream. Another one is Isaiah 58, 6-7. It says, is not this the kind of fasting I've chosen? To loose the chains of injustice and untie the cords of the yoke? To set the oppressed free and break every yoke? Is it not to share your food with the hungry and to provide the poor wanderer with shelter? When you see the naked, to clothe them and not to turn away from your own flesh and blood? Those are two passages out of hundreds that talk about this. We're to show an extraordinary level of care for both the mother and the baby, because this comes from the fact that we as humans, we are all created in the image of God. We have infinite value and worth and dignity that no one can strip from us. And so we've got to show that care. We've got to show that respect and that honour to the human life in front of us, to the people who are going through difficult circumstances, to the people who need our help, to the people who are already feeling shame and feeling hurt and they just need someone to listen to them. That is what we need to do for those people. And so this brings me on quite nicely to the third point, which is that we actually need to do something. Like if we want to make an impact on abortion, if we want to bring those numbers down, we need to take tangible action, which is going to cost us something. Because typically the focus is on changing policy, okay, making the laws against abortion and making it illegal and having all these laws in place to stop abortions happening. And so what we as Christians tend to do is we vote for the people who say they oppose abortion and we hope it'll get written out of law. That is a complex thing. It's not something that I want to get into today because it's beyond the scope of what I'm talking about. I'm definitely not an expert on abortion law and all the politics behind it. What I will say is that in 2017 and in 2018, Planned Parenthood in the USA, they received, they're the largest abortion provider in the US, they received record levels of funding, despite the fact that Donald Trump was president and he was voted in largely on the fact that he said he was going to end abortion in the US. He said that he would defund Planned Parenthood. Christians voted for him. Clearly that didn't work. Now, I don't live in the US, I live in Northern Ireland, and our political situation is really complex. Again, Not going to go into that today. We've had abortion forced on us by the UK government against the wishes of our own government, with no consultation of the people. It's a political headache trying to understand our situation, but that's really annoying. And for the average person, politics is probably not the best way to stop abortion or to bring the numbers down. If we're only trying to stop abortion with the way that we vote, to be honest, we're really not doing that much. Okay, you don't have to vote all that often. It's every couple of years. If you're only opposing abortion by ticking for certain people in the poll booth, you're not doing a whole lot. The same goes for sharing stuff on Facebook or Instagram. Not that there's anything wrong with that, and not that there's anything wrong with considering abortion whenever it comes to our votes, but if that is all you're doing, that's slacktivism. That is not making a tangible difference. That is not doing enough. Again, coming back to the first point, that stuff doesn't address the actual real reasons why women are having abortions. I genuinely believe this. The power to stop abortion, the power to bring the abortion numbers really far down, lies in the church, and what we can offer to women and to girls and to people who are going through this stuff, who are maybe a young couple's got pregnant and they don't know how they're going to support it. We as a church have the means and the ability and the capability to be able to help, and developing that culture where we help, developing that culture where we're a place that people can be open about this and where people feel that they can come and ask for support and get help. Developing that culture starts with how we treat individuals. Because, I realise we don't want to condone sex outside of marriage, okay? That is not our thing as Christians. We oppose that. To be honest, I think everybody knows that. Most people, certainly in Northern Ireland, they know that Christians oppose sex outside of marriage. And so if you kick a young girl out of youth group because she has had sex outside of marriage and she's got pregnant, then yeah, you're maybe sending the message that sex outside of marriage is not okay. But actually what you're also saying is that sex outside of marriage is the unpardonable sin. You're telling them that if they get pregnant, they will be shunned and they will not have your support. You're telling them that the baby's life is a shameful thing, and you're telling them as well that it's solely the girl's responsibility and that the guys get a free pass in this. So then, if that happens and another girl at your church gets pregnant, is she more or less likely to have an abortion? Will she feel like the church is a space where everyone is welcome and where grace and where love are available to everybody? No, I really don't think so. It'll ostracize, it'll alienate, it'll make them feel, okay, I'll not be welcome there because I've done this awful thing, so I'll maybe just get an abortion so that I can still hang out with my friends, I can still go to that place that I love going to. All of that just to make a point that everybody already knew. Instead though, if you provide support for financial needs, if you have a parenting course, if you help with the childcare when she finishes school, those things aren't going to show that you support sex outside of marriage. Those things are going to show that you care for people. And if we go back to the stats, if those 73% of women, those ones who had said, okay, I'm having an abortion for financial reasons, if they'd been given financial support, if they'd been given help, and if they'd been given the tools to strengthen their finances, would they still have had the abortion? Maybe, like some might have, but also maybe not. There are countless stories of women and girls who got pregnant and were maybe going to have an abortion because they didn't have adequate support, they didn't have the help, they had no structure of support around them, but then churches or Christian organisations stepped in and they offered that person the help that they needed, and so they went ahead and had the baby. If we want women to stop having abortions, we need to make it as easy as it possibly can be for them to have that baby. And that doesn't just mean allowing them to have the baby and then forgetting all about them. We've got to continue to support them and to help them and care for them and look out for them. That's what the church is supposed to do. The church is supposed to bring hope into dark situations and empower people to live out God's purpose for their lives. Whatever the barriers are to that, whether it's their finances or their life situation or a lack of stability, we need at least to offer a means of overcoming those. Because that, more than anything else, more than all of the protesting, more than all of the lawmaking, that is how we bring the abortion rate down. Look, I've said a lot on this. There's probably a lot more that could be said. I definitely haven't covered it all, but I'll stick links down below to the study. I'll stick some links to helpful organisations and church groups and Christian groups that are just good on this stuff. And again, just want to thank you for being here. Whether you agree with me, whether you disagree with me, thank you for taking the time to hear my thoughts. Maybe you have been challenged by this, maybe you've been encouraged by this, or maybe this is like a new perspective for you and it's given you some stuff to think about. That would be great. I really hope that is the case. So thank you for being here. I will see you in the next video. God bless.